What is up, folks? We are just waiting on Uncle Dan to get this thing started. He's having a issue getting into the room, but we're figuring it out, and we are going to get this debate underway. We will be debating if we've ever seen two pretty best friends. We're not sure though who's taking which position.
It's gonna be a wild debate.
Yeah.
Dan is having some issues.
Yeah, he's having some technical difficulties apparently. Let's see, we got 59 so far in here. But yeah, what was I just gonna? I was just gonna ask you something. Shit, now I can't think of what it was. But yeah, let me know if you and that Carl guy want to set up a debate sometime. I'd be down. I'm trying to do more live stream content anyway.
Yeah, I'll talk to him. You said you have some interviews coming up here.
Yeah, I'm just I'm gonna interview this guy. He works with the Times. He's got a YouTube channel called Remix Everything. He does like conspiracy content. Like his big thing right now is like how do we reach like the QAnon people. So I wanted to have him on to talk about that, which I don't think a lot of them are reachable, but there's a section of them that are. So if we can turn them into leftists, it'll be good to go.
Yeah, they're a little out there.
I look at the chat.
I don't know how we reel them in.
I always say they're one, not believing in democratic satanic cabals away from being progressive. It's just right there. All right, I'm gonna send him this email real quick. We're trying to get Uncle Dan in, folks. Don't worry. There's a will, there's a way.
Uncle Dan.
What movie is that from? It's on the top of my tip of my tongue.
Lieutenant Dan.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
We need some music to start this off with.
Dun 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 dun. That's all I got. Don't look at copyrighted anything else. Fucking YouTube is terrible about that.
Oh yeah.
Unless it's like like
jazz or piano music.
Basic bitch music, basically is all you can play. Sure it's on. All right.
People are giving. I showed my coffee earlier, and people were giving me shit because I like a little coffee in my creamer. People were giving me a lot of
cream. Yeah, I put a lot of cream and sugar in my coffee too. All right. Well, while we're waiting, anybody got any questions? I can pop one up on screen here, and we can talk about it. By the way, if you've never seen Tommy, my dude, on TikTok, his ats below. If you want to go follow him, that's it right there. It's linked below. So is Uncle Dan's.
Uncle Dan. I don't think me and Dan are going to be at his people's throat. A lot of a lot of people with TikTok are more aggressive on TikToks because you only have a minute.
Yeah,
You only have a minute, right? I can't go into depth and explain why you're wrong. I just do it aggressively. But Dan's the same way. There's a lot of people like that. They're the same way. Hopefully, we have a productive talk, and he comes out understanding why he's wrong.
Yeah, that's always the hardest part of TikTok is what you have to cut out and still make a cogent argument, like still make it work. Because it's that's the thing I always struggle with is like, cutting 3 seconds here, cutting a second there. I wish they would, I mean, I guess that kind of is the appeal, the just quick 60-second, but I wish you could get like a 2-minute video in there or something,
Ooh, I think
You echoing?
no, my people are complaining about my computer fan. Oh, I can't set it over there. Is that better? Can you hear less of it now?
I don't hear anything.
No, on my live because where my phone's at.
Oh.
Actually, let's try this.
Where the fuck is Dan? I don't know where Dan is. Dan
okay,
is.
How's that? Is that better? There we go. Actually, now I can see both screens. It's because my phone was like right in the crack where the fan is. That's why. So they were all complaining that it sounded like there was a chopper. Because I have the fan on over there. Dan, come on.
And then send it here.
And I have a computer that's super old, so the camera on this thing's not that great. So
you just got the regular webcam.
Is that better? No, it's still terrible. Yeah.
Dan, I asked for your email so I can. This guy is killing me. Now he's giving me a different email to address.
Uncle Dan apparently to the people in the comments is going to kick my ass. Okay.
Well, that's going to happen. That's what sucks about debate. Like it's kind of the funny thing about debates is like no matter what, like people are always like, "Oh, no, you got destroyed," and then other people are like, "Oh, well, you're dumb. That clearly that person got destroyed."
Yeah. They're saying they want my volume up. How's my volume? Is it okay?
I can hear you all right.
Don't worry, Dan. Dan is coming. I hope. I mean, I set aside the time.
You just pop. What was that? There he is. There's that sumbitch. It's a Uncle Dan.
Can't hear him.
It's a Uncle Dan. We can't hear. Can't hear you. Just sign it.
Oh, Lord.
There we go. All right.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can hear me.
Uncle Dan with his hair looking amazing as always.
I'm gonna switch around here.
I got flustered and knocked my whole eye apparatus off in trying to set this up.
I had a pirate joke all lined up and everything. Damn.
I'm gonna. Here, actually, this will probably work better here for me. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all good, man. Wait, the video is unavailable. You fucking schmucks.
A little bit better. There we go. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you good. Okay.
Excellent.
Everything. Oh, hey Dan, real quick. Go to the. Kind of hear like some reverb or something, but do you hear that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Hey, go to the cog wheel. See on the bottom there. Go all the way to the right.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Okay, go over to the right,
and then go to advanced settings. and make sure the echo cancellation, the noise suppression, and all that stuff's checked, basically.
Yeah, it's all checked.
Okay, I won't be talking too much anyway.
Is that real? That can't be Joe Gillespie. He blocked me, so I know it's not Joe Gillespie.
I mean, you never know.
Someone's username is Joe Gillespie the Great. I posted on his thing when I first started, before I even made a video, like hitting back against someone that was attacking him, and it didn't get posted on that comment. It went into his general thing, right? You know how like sometimes it'll mess up and go right into their comments as opposed to like a reply. Yeah, he deleted it and blocked me.
Yeah, happens to the best of us, I suppose.
I was defending him.
My dude sucks ass. Well, I mean, that's, I think that's a debatable point. God, you guys are so harsh. This is a civil discussion. Okay.
Yes.
So, what was I gonna say? So anyway, we are debating, I believe, really discussing if we've ever seen two pretty best friends. But no, we're going to be discussing whether POC can perpetuate racism, right? That's what the discussion is about. And
well, I think it was more specific. I mean, yeah.
I mean, we can talk about whatever you guys want. I mean, that was kind of the general topic. But Dan, that's what I was going to say. If for some reason you want to share something on your screen, the
people are complaining in the chat. I'm Uncle Dan in your chat.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
If you wanna share something from your screen, I can just pull it up if you want me to. But the third button in, you can pop something up on your screen. It comes up like that. So I don't know if you guys are gonna do anything like that, but yeah. So ball out. Go ahead.
Really quickly, can people hear me? They're complaining about that chat.
I can hear you. Okay.
I can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Guys in the chat, I have like a shitload of music equipment. I could go pull a mic. It's just going to take me about half an hour, so I'd rather not.
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. So who's starting this one off?
Just make sure you talk into the mic.
I don't know if you just want to lay the ground for your position here first.
Okay. So my position on this is pretty simple. For starters, white people cannot claim racism in our society. One, because the entire term racism is dependent on the context in which it was created, which was to combat the idea of white superiority. That's pretty much my whole spiel there. We'll get into the rest of it later.
Okay, so my position is that racism is, by definition, about feeling superiority in your own race, and it is, in my opinion, unproductive to, because the changing of the word or the new definition that we hear people talk about today came about in 1970, brought up by Patricia Badal, and I think it is problematic to change the definition of a word such as racism to essentially further perpetuate the ideal of whiteness when this is a white person telling people of color that they are incapable of feeling a sense of superiority in their own race.
I'm not saying. So I'm not.
I'm sorry, no, I'm not laughing at you.
You're in the comment.
Sorry, I was laughing at a comment. Yeah. No.
So the idea, it's not about feeling white superiority. It's not about feeling superior in your race. It's about an inherent belief that your race is superior. So I think Dan, his whole argument is based on the fact that, it's not inclusive of the definition, but the entire idea of the word racism was created to explain a condition in the United States from Black people that Black people experience towards white people. That was the initial. It's been expanded on since then. It's not, when we're looking at the term racism, we're not looking at the definition of the term racism. There's a whole field of study on it. So that's more where I'm going.
Well, I understand. Like, could you maybe define for me what you feel the difference is between racism and systemic racism?
Yeah, absolutely. Racism is a perpetuation of white superiority.
Okay.
Institutional racism are the effects of racism on institutions and the outcomes and the disparities between different ethnic groups in our institutions, whether it be criminal justice, whether it be banking related, whether it be working related. That's the difference.
Okay. So the problem, because in preparing for this, I talked to some, I mean, as some of my followers know, my roommate is Black. I talked to multiple Black people. I was looking up, at Black creators, and to be honest, some of them did agree with your position, but I also had many of them who, again, from what I was saying, and they had a problem with essentially is a white person telling them that the definition of racism, that for the most part, most people that I've come across have the defined racism that just simply includes the feeling of superiority from one race, and that can be felt by any race. Any race can feel a sense of superiority in themselves to another race, and they specifically a couple of the Black people I talked to had a distinct problem with a white person telling them that they are incapable of feeling superiority within their own race. And we had a situation recently with a very well-known Black actor, Nick Cannon, who essentially was raked over the coals after saying that white people are savages, and literally called them less than. And that is like the definition of feeling superiority. And for a white person to tell a Black person that no, you can't have the sense of superiority, you are incapable, it just seems like a further perpetuation of the sense of white superiority. When we're trying to move away from that, we're trying to project the sense of equality in all people, and to tell people of color that they are incapable of feeling superiority, because that's the definition that I was always raised with, is that racism is a sense of superiority, or it can include prejudice or discrimination, but it's a sense of superiority in one's own race over another one. And when we have people like Nick Cannon, who he's an extremely successful person, he has millions of followers on his different social media accounts, and to basically tell people that no, that's not racism, I don't think is productive, and it doesn't help a future society where we all view each other as equal, but instead are looking at everything through the lens of this is whiteness and these are people of color, when in fact, I mean, whiteness includes many cultures that are necessarily the beneficiaries of the white superiority complex that we most recently have been projecting. I can go deeper into that, but I don't know if you have anything to say off of what I just.
Yeah. So first things first, it's a difficult subject to talk to people of color and try and explain their own experience, right? So I wouldn't bring that up to someone saying that is a person of color saying white people can experience racism too. I wouldn't correct them on that. That's not my place, right? I think the biggest distinction here that we have to make isn't about someone feeling like they're superior, right? It is an inherent belief that they are superior. And it's not like you don't have to personally believe that white people are superior, that your own race is superior, right? Racism is continuing to do things and to act and to think in ways that support the idea that white people are the superior race, right? So it's not really about feeling, right? It's what you've been conditioned to believe. And that's the big distinction here. right? Because if we're talking about Nick Cannon, for instance, right, there's no inherent cultural belief that Black people are superior. So when you're looking at someone saying, well, they think that they're superior, okay, well, it's like comparing Jim Jones to the Catholic Church, right? Inherently, you don't believe him. That's why Mormons people make fun of Mormons, because inherently they're not believed. And that's the big distinction. Is it's not about feeling, it is about an inherent belief that has been passed down to us in the creation of the structural ideas of race over time in America.
So with going off that, so I feel like when it comes to Nick Cannon, and I don't know, I went over a couple creators in this past week of people who are Black Israelites, and it's a religion that essentially perpetuates the idea of Black superiority. So it's not for these people who follow this religion. It's not just a feeling for them. They earnestly believe that Black people or people of melanin are genetically superior to white people. And while it may not be like a common, it's growing. And I've seen just in the last week 3 different young Black men who were pushing this idea that essentially, one of them straight up said that white people are mayonnaise monkeys. Nick Cannon called them closer to animals, savages, and less than. So I think it's a problem, even if this isn't a pronounced widespread thing. It's growing, because I certainly have seen more of these people as of late. But I think it's a problem for future societies, for us to not point out things that are again, going back to the definition that I have grown up with, which is that racism is a sense of superiority in one's race that can be perpetuated by anybody, is to now change that and not call, because whether it's super common or not, these oops, I got something popping up. This idea is the same thing that started the sense of white superiority in the first place. It's like it was pushed by a lot of times by eugenics, by religious belief, and to not call that the same thing. It feels like it is it's like doubling down on the idea of whiteness in the first place. And I think there's a problem with this idea of whiteness in general, because I can tell you that I as a descendant of Polish immigrants, I've always felt that if you look at the history of Polish people, like in Chicago, has the largest population of Polish people outside of Warsaw. And when you look at their history there, they were delegated to slums and ghettos. They've worked blue collar and manual labor jobs, and there is an extremely low level of generational wealth within the Polish community. Yet we are now deciding that Polish people are white people now, and the beneficiaries of this white privilege, when in fact for most of their history they've been not treated as white people, but essentially Slavic gutter trash. And now we're deciding that they have the same privilege that most people have, when in fact, like I said, they have an extremely low level of generational wealth. So when you look at Polish people, they probably have a lot more similar history within this country to a lot of like Latino or Hispanic people. You look at Chicago, if you order a cleaning crew, they're most likely going to be Polish people. So it just seems silly to, within this idea of whiteness, to include all these people simply based off of melanin in their skin, when in fact there are many white people that have not been the beneficiaries of this privilege.
Right. I don't think so. I don't. Are you? Can I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't. I mean, as far as the idea that I think anyone is saying Black superiority is okay. I think that most people would disagree with that, right? It has to do with when we're looking at the term racism, right? We're looking at the idea that there is a subgroup of people in this country that are treated as such. They are marginalized to an extreme extent, to say that racism could apply to white people is like saying that someone could be homophobic towards someone that's straight. It lacks and denies the concept of what it is meant to approach, right? Be like calling me calling someone anti-Semitic. I'm not Jewish, right? It lacks the context. So I don't think anyone's out here going, like there's a difference between understanding racism in society and using that to then link it up with black superiority, like they're the same thing, right? They're not. As far as Polish immigrants, yeah, there are subgroups, right? When you get into there's the overarching white, and then there's subgroups. There's Irish, Italian, Scottish, whatever, Polish. The idea, though, is that the distinct difference between subgroups in the white culture and subgroups in the black culture is that subgroups in the black culture or in the white culture aren't immediately identified, right? So you can immediately identify that someone is black. You can't immediately identify, in all the time at least, that someone is Polish. The idea of white privilege is simple, that two people in a random given set of circumstances will be treated differently, right? That doesn't mean that every white person is going to become rich because they have white privilege. White privilege has to do with black people in this country being treated differently than white people in any given random circumstance. So that's yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to deny that absolutely in certain circumstances that white people have a privilege, and I think a lot of that comes from again, well, generational wealth and that, but it also comes from having a larger population of white people in this country. And I think if you look at other countries such as China, there's going to be a distinct advantage to being Chinese in China. I think a white person could absolutely be the victim of racism if they travel to China. I have a lot of Asian friends, and honestly, they'll tell you themselves that a lot of Asian people can be incredibly racist. So I think it's problematic to say that racism is an inherently white thing when you exit this country or even go to in certain places. Like it denies the existence of micro like communities within themselves that have a completely different power dynamic than society as a whole. I think you can go to many different communities. I lived in one myself. Within the last year, I lived there for a couple of years, where me and my roommate were legitimately the only white people on the entire street, and there was an absolutely different power dynamic there. There was also a large presence of gang activity in this area, but there was many instances where me and my roommate, and again, I've grown up around Hispanic communities my entire life on the west side of Chicago. I feel actually a very close sense of community with a lot of Hispanic culture. But there was an absolute, when we first moved there, a sense that we were the outsiders, and they were very clear early on to make us aware that we had no power there. We got our car vandalized multiple times, both me and my roommate. And when my roommate approached them about the vandalization, they essentially said, you're a white person, you have no power here, and just deal with that. And he goes, if you don't, we'll do something about it for you. And he, threatened him with that he's got felonies and stuff. And my roommate ended up going to the police. And when he went to the police, they essentially said, "There's nothing we can do. You move." They told us to move a month after living there. So I think this idea that there, because absolutely there's an advantage to being white in a lot of sense in our society, but I think changing the definition of racism to specifically be something about whites it gives the wrong idea to other cultures moving here. We're like a melting pot society. I think Black people are absolutely a unique situation in this, because obviously they have, unlike any other ethnic minority in the United States, have a very unique history. But to group that history with all other cultures and people included in this people of color definition is really problematic, and it doesn't give the right idea to other cultures moving here to basically, again, like I've said, because I think the big problem is that we're just not agreeing on the definition of racism. I still very much feel that racism can be perpetuated on an individual basis, on a feeling of a sense of superiority. And I, like I've said, I've talked to many of my Asian friends, not only just to white people, but to like Black people. I've seen many Asian people. When I went I was with one of my friends. I mean, this is an anecdotal experience, but I was with one of my Black friends a couple months ago, and we went to this Asian restaurant, and we both sat down at the table. And I can tell you, I was disgusted by the reaction. That it was like a group tables. I was disgusted by the reaction that this Asian family had to my Black friend sitting at this table.
Right. So here's my question, though. You could experience that if you were an outsider in a town. It doesn't necessarily have to do with race, right? You could be targeted because you're an outsider. I mean, if I want to use anecdotal evidence, if you're a big game hunter and you go to Idaho, they'll vandalize your car. They'll trash it, right? So the idea that it's explicitly towards race, I don't see it. But here's the thing, right? So we could say that's bigotry, right? We could say that's prejudice. We could say that's bigotry. Mm-hmm. Racism isn't about, right? The idea of racism isn't about targeting a specific person or a specific whatever, right? It is about maintaining the power structures, pushing the power of pushing white superiority in our everyday lives. And there are different types of it, right? There's institutional, there's individual racism, there's inequality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Racism, the idea of racism is to bring light to the way that a marginalized group is treated based on the color of their skin and based on their ethnicity, right? That's what racism is. It's not about every instance of wrong that someone's done against someone that's white.
See, I mean, I disagree with that. I think that there's a distinct difference between systemic or institutional racism and racism on an individual basis, which, again, we're going... Well, I basically think what your definition of racism is basically, like, there's no difference between your definition of racism and the definition of systemic racism that I've pulled up here for myself on my computer. I think there's no benefit to, because again, that like the definition that you're going off of.
No, there is a benefit. The entire term racism is a benefit to society. It doesn't have to benefit an individual person. It benefits understanding how race plays a part in the United States. That is the benefit.
But what I'm saying is that I don't feel that you're changing of the definition of the word of racism on its own.
It's not changing.
It is changing it, because it changed in 1970. Patricia Badal is the one who brought up your definition of racism. Racism and the definition that's in the dictionary, like you told me when we were looking up before, to look up on Google, and I pulled up multiple different sources here that none of them include the idea of power or whiteness within them. It's that any different individual can feel a sense of superiority in their own race, and they can, in many different ways, use that inherent bias that they have within themselves to perpetuate the idea of racism. That you
just said it.
What?
Inherent. Inherent's not a feeling. It's your inherent belief. The inherent belief of structure in the United States built around racism. If you even go back to the original time, the first time that racism was used in the United States, right? It was referring to Jim Crow laws. It was referring to explicit racism. It wasn't referring to individual racism.
I think it's incredibly, honestly, man, I think it's incredibly racist for you to make the idea of racism something that is only whiteness, when on a worldly perspective, you can go to many other countries and not experience the same like societal benefit that white people experience here. You're changing that and saying that racism can't be perpetuated in China because you said that the definition includes whiteness.
It doesn't just include whiteness. It has to do with a marginalized group in a community.
You said whiteness in your definition, Tom.
In America,
you said it.
In America, there can be racism.
That's not what I'm talking about. We exist in a world society.
Oh my God. Okay,
we exist in a world society that includes many different societies. For you to say that racism, you included whiteness in your definition of racism. And now with saying that, you're saying that someone in China can't perpetuate racism because they're not white. We live in a world society. The United States is part of a worldly society that includes many other cultures.
All right, let him rebut that.
Dan, it has to do with the marginalized group based on race. There is racism in Asian communities. There is racism in Latino communities, right?
Yeah, and it can be perpetuated against white people. I don't know what you're...
The idea that you somehow have to have access to the term racism, right, is perpetuating racism. No. Because here's the fact, we're not equal, right? We don't live in an
equal society. That's racist right there. You're assuming that in every situation that we're not equal, that we have an inherent superiority. That's perpetuating the idea, projecting the idea of white superiority. And you know what? That's not going to help future generations. That's not going to help us all feel equal. The idea
that you have to have access, the idea that you have to personally claim access as a benefit to yourself to claim racism is not part of what we're talking about. You want
it is what we're talking about. And we're also talking about the fact that you included whiteness in your definition of racism. Like, explain that. You literally said whiteness in the definition of racism. That's literally in every dictionary definition I've brought up has nothing to do with that. So you have to explain to me why your definition is the right one when it contradicts every single dictionary definition I've brought up. Every single one.
It doesn't. Can you pull it up?
It does.
I'll tell
the one right here. Racism definition. Belief that a race is a fundamental determination of human traits and capacities, and that races differential produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. A particular race. It can be any race. This is Webster, the most used dictionary in our world. And that's what the definition is. It contradicts your definition. And that's what you told me. You told me to look up the definition, and I did, and it didn't match your definition, and now you're saying it's the wrong definition.
No, it literally says what I'm saying. What do you think inherent means? You're saying that a feeling of someone having...
You said whiteness! Dude, you said whiteness in your definition! I feel like I'm dealing with... I think I'm a crazy person. You said whiteness in your definition, and now I bring up the Webster definition. It says nothing about whiteness. It says literally any race has the potential feelers.
It has to do with power structure.
It says nothing about power structure there.
All right, guys. Let's not talk over
it. Nothing.
Go ahead. You talked for a minute there, Ryan. So let's just let
every single definition that I have brought up says nothing about power structures. It's the racism on itself. That systemic racism is about power. Like every single definition I brought up of systemic racism goes into a power structure and a political ideology behind the idea of this suppression of people. Racism individually is that people can feel a superiority complex within their own race, and it can be anyone. In every single definition I brought up has said that. And I fail to see how perpetuating this idea of separateness between white people and people of color, when we've already gone over that black people have an individual experience, so it doesn't make sense to include all people of color in this ideal with black people who have a very individual experience. And as I said, Polish Americans have a similar experience to Mexican Americans, but we're now including them in this idea of white superiority. It doesn't make sense. We need to be going away from this idea of perpetuating this idea of whiteness and then people of color, and your definition of racism is doubling down on this white superiority. We need to be moving away from that. We need to be projecting the idea that we're all equal. And we can all equally perpetuate the same.
I think we established your position. Let him rebut for a minute. I'll pull up the thing you just linked to me.
I think the idea of calling someone racist for saying that white people shouldn't have access to a term that's not for them in this country, and then strawmanning my position is
I
kind of
don't feel that I strawman your position. You used whiteness in your definition of
right,
racism.
because we live in America. You're making this about a different country, right?
Because we live in a worldly society. There's many different levels. There's small communities, there, and then there's the American society. Then there's society as a whole, a world society. So I'm operating on all three levels that people can on different level. If we're looking at the American community as a whole, sure, white people have an advantage, and a lot of them have generational wealth, and there can be discrimination on that level. But if we're looking at small communities or on the worldly scale, it doesn't make sense to include whiteness in the definition of racism, which is what you did.
It's not just whiteness. I gave you the historical term racism as it was used originally, right? And it's been expanded on, right? There's racism that goes on in the Latinx community. There's racism that goes on in Asia, right? There's absolutely racism that goes on all over the world. But the idea is of racism, it is directed at a marginalized group based on race or ethnicity. And in the United States, the marginalized groups are POC.
So why are you bringing up just specifically the United States? I never in my
I don't know, maybe because we live here, Dan.
Yeah, but we live in the world as well. We live in the world as well. So why wouldn't you also include that? Like you're using a specific definition that is just for our specific country. I'm talking about the world scale. And you know what? We're the melting pot of the world. We have people from other countries moving here every single day, and to tell them that they are incapable of feeling the sense of superiority is ridiculous. It doesn't help them. It makes you're telling them as a white person, no, you can't feel superiority. How is that beneficiary?
No. This is why you're strawmanning my position.
Okay.
This is why you're strawmanning my position. The idea is not feeling superiority. That's not the idea of racism.
That is what the definition of racism is.
Just let him make his point. That
the idea is an inherent belief. The idea that we have grown up and been conditioned to believe that white people are the superior race. You yourself admitted that there was white privilege. Well, I guess in some circumstances, that is what we're talking about when we're talking about people being conditioned since birth to have inherent beliefs, right? Like, for instance, I don't know your race, right? But I was raised Catholic. So inherently, I think that all other, as a kid, when I believed in that, right, I thought all other religions were ridiculous. I had an inherent belief, a conditioned belief. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone saying, oh, well, like Jim Jones going up against the Catholic Church. Okay. We're the superior church. Who believes them? No one, right? The same thing when you're talking about black supremacists. No one inherently believes them. The same reason that people didn't believe.
That is racist, though. That is racist for you to make that claim.
Dan, let me talk. The same reason that that the Catholic and Christian church didn't believe that Charles Manson was the next coming of Christ. That is why. It is an inherent belief. And for you to call it racist is borderline ignorant.
It's borderline ignorant. I think it's racist for you to take a situation like Nick Cannon, who is he's a popular person. He's got millions of followers on his Instagram.
Do you believe him?
Do I believe him?
Did you believe him? Did you believe?
No, that doesn't mean it's not right. I don't believe white supremacists. That doesn't mean it. I don't believe white supremacists. What? Like, I don't. When a white supremacist says that white people are genetically superior, I think you're dumb. I think you're stupid.
Exactly. We all do. That's not what racism is. And boiling down the idea of racism into including
what racism is. It's in every single dictionary definition.
For the same reason that boiling down white superiority into white supremacy is ridiculous.
When every single dictionary definition agrees with me.
If you saw the private chat, you can pull up and read the goddamn. It's from Vanderbilt.
From Vanderbilt? So
I tried to pull it up on screen, but it wouldn't for some reason.
So you pulled up no offense, like I brought up the Webster dictionary. I read the definition for you.
Yeah, and apparently you didn't understand that one, so I'm sending you a cheat sheet.
Oh my God. I don't think I have a misunderstanding. I think the definition in there says that it's a sense of superiority. I think what you're trying to do, I don't think You're trying to do it on purpose, but you are perpetuating the idea.
Why do you feel like you need to be entitled? Why do you feel like you need to be entitled to claim racism? What net benefit does it have?
Entitled? I don't know what you're. I don't think.
What net benefit does it give you?
I don't know what you're asking here.
What net benefit does you claiming racism do? What does it do for society?
What happened? Oh, there he is.
Hello?
Oh. I see you.
So it cut off when you were just saying what net benefit. I didn't hear anything after that.
I said, what net benefit does it give you to claim racism? What net benefit do we get as society? Because that's what the original.
It's not a net benefit to individually me. It's thinking of what benefit that this definition has for our future society in which we have more equality. I don't think doubling down on the idea of whiteness as a thing separate from people of color is going to be beneficial to future societies. I don't think it's going to help telling people that they are incapable of feeling a sense of superiority within themselves.
Okay, let me explain it like this, Dan. Let me explain it like this. Systemic racism, what's your depth of knowledge on that?
My depth of knowledge is what systemic racism is essentially what you are calling racism on its own. I don't think there's a benefit to merging those two definitions. I don't feel that's beneficial to double down on the idea of the importance of identity politics and having a sense of identity with your race before your sense of identity as an individual. I think that's incredibly harmful. I think we should be telling people to be focusing on themselves as their importance and their strengths and weaknesses as an individual, not identifying with the strength and weaknesses of the amount of pigmentation they have in their skin. I think that's silly. It's not beneficial to people to tell them that, and to tell them that they're not capable, again, because you said yourself, you wouldn't tell a black person that said to you that they, and honestly, man, I have a hard time saying when you just are sitting there with this smirk on your face. I don't think you're taking it seriously. As I told you, to future societies, telling them that their racial identity is more important than their identity as an individual is problematic. It's not going to help anybody. What is your benefit to saying that? To telling other ethnic minorities that they are incapable of being racist? That it's a whiteness thing.
All right, let him respond. Go ahead.
Well, the reason that I'm smirking, Dan, is because that was not the correct answer for systemic racism. That's why I was smirking.
You've disagreed with my definition of racism from the beginning. So I'll smile, man. It's
okay. I'll stop being a dickhead. Here's my thing, Dan. Systemic racism is in large part invisible, right? It is the discrepancies that emerge through whatever reason, right? But it's in large part invisible. We know that these discrepancies exist. There's a huge field of study into why these discrepancies do exist, right? And they come to a lot of different conclusions on them, okay? So when we're talking about discrepancies in criminal justice, or when we're talking about discrepancies in housing, when we're just talking about whatever, right? There's more often than not, there's multiple different reasons that these systemic indifferences exist, right?
Right.
That's what we're talking about when we're talking about white superiority. We're not talking about white supremacy, right? We're not talking about someone feeling like they're superior. We're talking about people having been conditioned to believe inherently that white people are the superior race. That's what we're talking about. When we're talking about the idea of racism, we are talking about things that are changing our cultural, the way that our culture is based on race, right? So for instance, explicit racism or systematic, which no one ever would call it that, but systematic racism, explicit racism, Jim Crow laws, institutional slavery, right? Institutional racism, which is things that have subtle impact on the outcomes of race, right? We're talking about that same thing, but in personal life. That same thing, but in our culture. That's racism. There's no net benefit
No.
for a white person claiming racism. It's
I-
counterproductive.
That's okay. I disagree with that, and we're going back to, like, let's say the Nick Cannon thing. For you to say that he has no power in that situation when there's an entire religion based around that belief is in itself racist. You're basically telling him that in no situation could that, when in fact he's got millions of followers, and like I said, I've seen many people within the
Dan,
last
would
couple
you
of
please
weeks.
stop calling me racist? That's getting annoying.
No, I'm. Have you not done? There is absolutely that, I'm sure, in your life, in my own life, that have been racist things that we have unintentionally or
Absolutely, that's the
yes.
point.
Yeah, and I'm saying that anybody can have that, and any race can feel sense of superiority, and it's problematic for you to tell somebody like Nick Cannon that, oh, it's just bullshit what you think, and you have no power, so it doesn't matter. When in fact the things that he's saying are the exact same line of thinking and logic that the Nazis used. It's eugenics. It's using a religion and saying that they are God's chosen people, and that white people are closer to animals. There's no benefit to saying that that's not racism. Because in the future, what? I don't know what you're not understanding there. To tell Nick Cannon that, oh, you have no power when he has far more power than you do, and that his beliefs mean nothing when he is literally saying things that, like, white people are closer to animals. That is a problem.
He has no societal power.
He has more societal power than you do.
No, you're not understanding. Like, you're clearly not understanding. You just proved my point when you're talking about racist things that we have done and said, right? It is to outline, racism is not to outline everything to do with race. It is to outline the power structures between the marginalized groups and the majority groups.
That is what systemic racism is.
No, it is not.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Every definition agrees with me. The Webster Dictionary agrees with me. Like, that's the yes, that's the first one that I brought up.
Explain to me systemic racism.
I can pull up the definition I have right here. Sorry, I had to switch over.
Okay, I'm gonna. Yeah.
Systemic racism definition. I got it.
According to Wikipedia, institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within society or an organization.
Do you guys hear that?
Yeah, I think that absolutely agrees with what I just said.
It does not. Here, I'm going to read some off from Vanderbilt.
Oh my God.
Okay. Did that link not pull up for the Vanderbilt one?
I can't even get back to this. 1 second.
It's in the private chat. I couldn't pull it up on the thing for some reason. It's not working, the screen shares on my end anyway. You guys might be able to share it. Try the third button. Maybe it's because the third button, you should be able to tap that and then go to Chrome tab, and it should be able to share your tabs on the screen. But mine didn't work for some reason. I don't know why. I've never had an issue with it before. You guys have bad luck.
Can Dan pull it up?
He should be able to. The third button right after the camera button, it says screen share if you hover over it.
Okay.
Click it, and then you go to where it says Chrome tab, and then it'll list all your tabs that are open, and then you should be able to click on it and share it. But mine didn't work when I just tried to pull up the other one.
Yeah, it's just bringing me a workaround here. 1 second. Let me try to open this in the other tab here. I can't go back.
So I think while we got a second here, make sure while you guys are here, you like the stream. And I feel like we're having a good civil discussion. Let's just, we got all the time in the world, boys. Just deep breaths, Well, we're all chill here. We're all chill.
Here's the thing with institutional racism. It's a difficult concept for a lot of people to grasp. And I'm not saying that to be rude or anything. It is a difficult concept to grasp. It is inputs from Like, for instance, what's a good way to think of this? I don't know, like a sports team, right? You're born believing a sports team is the best sports team in the world, especially as a kid, even if they lose, right? That's the inherent belief. And when you have those inputs of 400 years of dehumanizing the black race, right, and people of color, that's what you get. You have to pass down those ignorances towards other races, and those get input into our institutions in normal practice by people that were exposed to it, which is everyone in the United States, people that
Right.
were exposed to it. And so that's what we're talking about. There's no net, the net
I mean, I don't
racism,
disagree with what you're saying, man.
right?
And that's
Racism isn't supposed to cover everything. It is its intended purpose is to bring light to the marginalization of groups by a majority based on race. That's what it's not supposed to show. Nick Cannon, oh, Nick Cannon did this. It's supposed to talk about societal influence of race.
I don't know if religion isn't a societal influence. I don't know what is. Okay, there's thousands and thousands of people who adhere to this ideology of black superiority. I mean, that's and thinking that white people are savages. So it's within its own contained community. There is absolutely a sense of racism there, and I don't find it beneficial to redefine the word, because it is a redefinition of the word that came up in the 70s. The original, the the definition came about in the 1930s, which was just on an individual basis that anyone could feel racism. And
That's not right. That's not right.
when okay, what
It
I mean
came up
that
in my recollection was it came up in like early 1900s, not the 1930s. I could be wrong about that, but it was explicitly talking about
I mean, it's not that.
Jim Crow laws.
But I don't feel like it's beneficial to not label something that in its own sense, I mean, religions for people are incredibly important, and for you to say that that's not influential, I just don't really find that to be
Right.
accurate.
If we lived in a society where both sides were equal, right? If we lived in a society where whites and blacks in our country and people of color were all equal, then yeah, what you're saying would be right, right? But the idea that somehow we're supposed to reinvent the wheel so that you can claim racism just because you like the word, I guess, against a marginalized group for some people that no one inherently believes is absurd. It delegitimizes what we're talking about when we're trying to understand
But
racism in our country.
thousands of people do actually agree with that. There
Hundreds
are
of
many.
millions of people believe in white superiority in some inherent sense. The
Uh,
idea that you would take
I don't. I mean, I don't think that there's like a dominant portion of our society that thinks that the white race is actually genetically superior.
right, nobody,
Okay,
right.
I think that we can all agree that in many places that where the largest portion of the population is a certain ethnic group, that ethnic group is going to experience certain levels of benefit from that. I think anyone would agree with that. Um, but I and again we've talked about the dichotomy between whites and blacks, but I think that also is cutting out every single other ethnic minority. Um, and we are, I think, we're the melting pot of the world, and I don't think it's beneficial for the future society to tell every single ethnic group that they are, again, incapable of feeling superiority. I don't. I think, and the definition that you um, have been bringing up is it was made by a white person, and for a white person to tell other ethnic groups that they can't feel a sense of superiority, I just don't see a way how that is beneficial. I think it is absolutely important to include this systemic racism that does affect people in this country. It is an absolute fact that systemic racism affects people generationally in this country. But to say that an individual can't feel a sense of superiority in themselves, and for you to say that as a white person, that an Asian person or a Latin person or any kind of ethnic group can't feel a sense of superiority in themselves, it feels like just a further projection of whiteness in itself. And I think we need to be moving away from that. We need to be moving towards, like, our goal is equality, right? So I think we need to be looking at what is going to get us there the fastest, and treating people as equals, I think, is the way to get there the fastest. It's not by telling people that, oh, you are incapable of feeling this. It's saying that, yes, there is an advantage to white people in this country, but on an individual level, I fail to see how it's beneficial to tell them that, because it further perpetuates this idea of whiteness in the first place, and we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to empower people on an individual level and move away from just identifying people with the pigmentation of their skin.
Right, but I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but you're
No, it's
implying
fine. I was
somehow
done.
you're implying that somehow we're equal. We're not. We're not in society. We're not societal equal. And I want to make clear. You keep bringing up this idea of feeling like a person can't feel like they were like they're superior. They absolutely can. That's not racism. Racism isn't just white supremacy, right? Racism is perpetuating white superiority in any way, shape, or form, whether you do it or whether you know you're doing it or not, right? And it's that way in America. It would be the same thing if it was flipped. It would be the same thing if black people had enslaved white people for 400 years. It would be the same thing. It has to do with the marginalized group, right? You can have racism in other countries. I'm not going to take a stab at it, but I'm willing to bet that the Uyghurs in China are probably being, in some respect, that there's racism going on there, right? The idea is in the United States that we're talking about is the inherent belief, right? I mean, sure, there's the people in China grow up thinking that they're superior in some way to Uyghurs, right? I think it's Uyghurs because they're not.
Yeah, Uyghurs. I think it is.
Uyghurs are from Turkey. So, but there is an inherent belief in that, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone feeling like something. We're talking about things that we grow up thinking, right? Like this is why it's like, for instance, jokes about the cops, like how they treat black people, right? We all understand that because we've all grown up in that concept, right? It's the underlying structures of white superiority and understanding it, right? It's not always all black and white, like no pun intended. It's not always black and white. It is, you could have grown up, your parents think a certain way, right? I'll give you an example. My uncle, he passed away a couple years ago. He was a super progressive, right? And he would always say the one thing that he couldn't get over, and he's like, I know it's wrong, I know it's bigoted, I can't get over it. He's like, I can't understand, or I don't like the idea of gay couples having kids. And he absolutely knew it, right? But it had been instilled in his brain since the time he was young that he couldn't get over it. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm superior. We're talking about this belief, this cultural belief that is created when you have 400 years of oppression, the remnants of explicit racism. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just got a text. I wanted to say to the chat, I'm sorry about my sniffling. Unfortunately, I had a cold recently, so my mom just texted me saying this is very loud. So sorry about that. So I think what the issue is, and it seems like, actually, I think we might agree, and we're kind of missing each other here. So what I'm even trying to say that on a global scale, because we exist in a global community as well, that racism can be perpetuated against the white people. So on that sense, I think we agree. I think again, because when you were just bringing up the definition of racism, you brought up the idea of whiteness again, and I think that's just like where we're missing each other here, because I think that yes, it is like innumerously more common for racism to be perpetuated by white people in the United States. That no one would question that on any scale. I just think that when we're using the to defining the term of racism, I disagree with you including the term whiteness, because like you said it again. I just think we should. And I don't even necessarily disagree with you including power. I think the focus should be on the sense of superiority, because I watched multiple different talks about the defining the term racism, and most of them focused on the individual's sense of superiority for their own race over another individual. So I think that's an important thing, because whether it has a large effect as whiteness does, I think it's still important to not to, because it almost feels like we're saying it's okay when sure the people like Nick Cannon doesn't have as big an effect, but it still does have an effect for people to, children watching Nick Cannon, because I was a huge fan of Nick Cannon for a long time. I mean, the movie Drumline was like, I loved that movie. I absolutely did. I mean, I wanted to after watching that, I wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to be Nick Cannon in that movie, and I can imagine as seeing a young child who looks up to Nick Cannon, and for him to like say that you're an animal, that could absolutely affect a young person. If it's not as much, that may absolutely be the case. It's not going to affect a white child as much as certain other aspects of racism could affect a black person. That's absolutely true. I absolutely concede that 100%. But to just push it to the side and say that it doesn't matter at all, I think is not beneficial, because they're like, it does affect, like for someone as big as Nick Cannon to basically call you an animal, as I can imagine like being like a young white kid is just like, especially someone who looks up to him, could be incredibly hurtful to them as an individual, thinking who identifies with this ethnic group. And I think what we essentially, I think we do agree on many levels. I think I want to move towards a society where we don't put such an emphasis on race in the first place, because again, like I said, as someone as a Polish descendant, I don't feel a close identification with other white groups. I feel that there's many different levels, and I feel like it's, to a future society, is far more beneficial for us to just be treating ourselves as equals. And there are absolutely inequalities, and like black people, one of the biggest issues is they don't have generational wealth, and I think we get there to equality by investing in their communities, treating them as equals rather than telling them that they're not equal, and that essentially they never will be, because defining this word in the way that it is basically saying that you have no power and you never will have power. And I think that's not the idea that we're trying to get across. I think we're trying to get to a place where we all feel equal to each other. And I just, in certain ways, I feel that it's doubling down on this idea of inequality by telling them they will never be equal. I just think that having the word racism being able to be perpetuated by any race, even though like obviously racism is bad, we don't want other races perpetuating this idea of superiority, but it is equality to tell them that they can perpetuate this idea of superiority within themselves, and it's treating them as equals. It seems like we're almost like talking down to them to tell them that they're incapable of feeling a sense of superiority. And I know we're kind of like missing each other on that, but honestly, I think we honestly in many ways agree with each other. In the United States, it is almost never that a white person is going to be the victim of
So I think
of racism. But on a worldly scale, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to define the word racism, including whiteness in any way, when it doesn't take into account a world community.
I mean, it's just in the United States, race is a very unique concept, right? Because we have so many different immigrant groups, and we've lumped them into 3 or 4, right? You have Native, blacks, white, and Latino, right? And that's largely the 4 main groups that we've lumped everybody into. Nobody is like when we're talking about like Nick Cannon, right? Yeah, sure. You could show me 1 or 2 or probably 100 instances of black superiority or to that effect. I could show you tens of thousands of white superiority instances.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So,
And yeah, it's. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. You can continue there.
So I think when we're talking about race, right, you're looking at it from the perspective of, in order to get equality, therefore all things must be equal, right? And that's just not the case, right? When we're looking at things like, and I don't want to get on way off topic here, but when you're looking at things like affirmative action, right, they're not things to make it unequal for people of color. It's to attempt to correct the wrongs of what we've done, right? And when we're looking at like, obviously there's going to be a point in time where I would hope that we would reach a point where there is no marginalized group and racism can return to sort of this general broad concept of, well, you're just racist towards race until there's another marginalized group. That would be the hope, right? But right now it's not like that. It's not equal, right? We have to have a term, we have to have a field of study to point out systemic inequality. We have to have a system and a field of study to point out racism and what it's doing, right? That's the problem, because when you have like, if you have like an instance of racism, right, how we react as a country effectually shows where racism is at. Whether, you know, the criminal justice, we see it all the time in the criminal justice system, right? How does the country react, right? When we see someone kneel on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and people are reacting like, well, it's George Floyd's problem. You know, this is what we're trying to point out, is these systemic injustices, the systemic problems, the ideas that people are believing that it's inherently his fault that he did it, right? That's what racism aims to point out, not this general overarching concept of just discrimination based on solely on race, right? That's bigotry. That's what racism is, the term and the body and the field of study that come with it are attempting to show, is how does race influence our society? How does it influence our institutions?
Again, I absolutely I see what you're saying. I still don't necessarily think it's beneficial to just relegate just based off of, you know, someone's skin pigmentation to say that you can only perpetuate bigotry. If you're this person, you can perpetuate racism, and that's fine if we have a bit of a disagreement. But I wanted to go back to something you were saying earlier that I think is actually just an interesting topic to bring up, because I saw that you commented on someone that I follow. They brought up affirmative action, and that it would be potentially more beneficial to delegate affirmative action based off of class rather than race, because I think a lot of people would agree that a lot of prejudice or against Black people, it has a lot to do with the fact that, again, going back to, they don't have generational wealth, and they're oftentimes in lower income communities, and there is a bias against people who have lower income. So there's going to be a lot of similar biases to a poor a white person who is brought up as like called white trash or something along those lines, as a Black person in a similar situation. And I think a lot of these prejudices that go against Black people have a lot to do with the fact that they haven't been able to grow generational wealth, and that they've been stuck in these communities. And I think this is going along the same lines of treating them as equal, saying that acknowledging that they are victims of and not having generational wealth, and getting them to that place by delegating out affirmative action based off of income and class, rather than focusing on race again. Because like I said, I don't think we disagree at all on the fact that Black people are by far and wide the most common victims of discrimination and racism. I think what I feel I'm trying to focus on is more of like the future, and how we can benefit the future, and the ways that people look at it, and changing the importance of looking at race first, rather than because honestly, I don't think beyond just specifically the definition of like racism and how it should be defined, I think we agree mostly.
The basic, if I could put your argument in a nutshell, is you think it's harmful for future generations to basically exclude people of color from being able to be racist. Like, you think that itself is racist by saying they're not able to.
Yeah, I just think in all aspects, not just specifically definition of racism, but in all aspects of society, we should be working towards having people, identify with themselves as an individual, and not with race. And I think, like, affirmative action, I'm not against necessarily the idea of it as a whole, but I think, again, to help define us all as equals, it's better to delegate it out in terms of class, rather than in terms of race, because it's still going to benefit Black people more, because again, they are in a lot of times after being victims of redlining, and just again low generational wealth, that they are going to, just by that definition, going to benefit more from
I think I think we're pretty. I don't think you'd disagree with this. I don't want to see affirmative action go, because a lot of what affirmative action does is make sure qualified people can't be discriminated based on gender, race, whatever, right? A lot of women benefit from it. I have no problem talking about the class argument, as far as ensuring that people of lower class with no generational wealth, maybe they grew up in the coal mines of West Virginia where there's not a lot of generational wealth there, or wherever, right, where they have access to education, where they have access to the ability to get out. I think that's a program different, separate from affirmative action. I don't disagree that we shouldn't have that program. I just think that affirmative action's goal, for the most part, is to make sure qualified people aren't marginalized.
No, because there's a lot of issue, because I think some people aren't a big issue is that they're not necessarily even racist. They have a bias to be by people who are similar to them, and I feel like defining of things more based off of individual, like, and for instance, affirmative action just being delegated off of individuals' class level and your just ability, rather than race could potentially be more beneficial to future societies, because again, we want the same thing. We want a society in which everyone is looked at as equal, and I think we essentially agree on most of this stuff, and in just this particular instance of the definition of racism is we're having some issue. But again, overall, I don't think we necessarily disagree on a lot. I just, I think you're, in terms of this discussion, you have focused more on specifically, the United States, which in some ways absolutely makes sense. We do live here, and I've been including it in more because this definition of racism has to also operate on a worldly scale. English is one of the world's most commonly used languages, and this term is going to be obviously used in other countries that don't necessarily have the same dichotomy that we have with white and black people. So yeah, I don't necessarily think there's too much more that we're kind of just getting stuck on this one definition here. I don't think there's too much more that we necessarily disagree on.
No, I think most people, the vast majority of people are in the black supremacy is not okay, as the same people are probably in the white supremacy is not okay group, right? There's probably just as many people that hate it, because I think for the most part, when we're looking at instances like that, I think it does I think what we're focusing on when we're focusing on the idea of racism isn't individual instances. It's how do we empower minority communities to equality, right? Because we all know they're not equal, like not in society, not in America. How do we make it equal? And that's the question that racism sets out to answer. But yeah.
All right. Any further things you'd like to branch out on? Maybe.
Yeah, Dan, where do you get your hair done at?
Man, honestly, that is kind of a sore topic. I feel like I've been like terrified my entire life of losing my hair, and I feel like now I'm like having receding going on in these areas, and it's just like scaring, because I feel like so much of my identity, people will go on every single video, people are talking about my hair, and I am terrified of losing it. Now it's like happening. It's just like I've had nightmares my entire life about this, so it's
you can take some from the back and like push it around.
I have a really low hairline in the back, so I think that could be done to an extent, but I don't know the science behind that.
How many hours do you spend on that thing a day? If that's natural, I'm pissed. If you don't have to do anything to maintain that, I'm pissed.
It's got that Robert.
No, honestly, I spend zero time on my hair. I get out of the shower, I dry it off. There's nothing in there or anything. That's the way it is.
Well, I usually at the end of my streams, I usually do like chat questions. I don't know if you guys want to do that. Yay, nay? How do you feel?
I mean,
it's a party.
I can't see the chat though because it
I can pop it up on screen.
It says your embedded link is invalid. I don't know.
Yeah, I can pop up questions on screen. So, if anybody has any questions, real quick, maybe on this topic, if you say something dumb, obviously I'm not going to pop up on screen. So, any serious questions. But yeah, no, I think it's really important. That's why I wanted to start having these live streams with other TikTokers. And obviously you guys are welcome on for other like panel discussions, debate, whatever you want to do, because especially going into this new administration, people that are in the center and on the left, I think we need to have more discussions about how we go forth and how we actually get things done and how we talk to each other again. Because that's the thing I'm worried about the most, is that we just don't communicate well at all anymore in this TikTok, Facebook, Instagram age. We kind of get in our bubbles and it is what it is. And, that's how it goes. And I think we need to have more discussions about everything, as many as possible, because, we all got to live here.
No, and honestly, I avoid doing a lot of debates because I think the debate community on TikTok is, and it did get a little heated in the middle, but I think we were able to end amicably, and because I think it's good, especially for we're not necessarily huge creators, but for people to see that it can be done, to have productive discussions about this stuff is important, because I mean from the few debates I've seen in the past is just not, and I think there was points, I think, where we were just waiting to respond, but I think we both did a decent job of listening to each other. And I'm honestly, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I did honestly, I appreciated this. At first I questioned whether I wanted to accept it, but honestly, yeah, this was fun. Because I think
I think you see a lot of debates on TikTok, and it's usually younger kids, and I think it's mostly just around winning. And I personally think like debates are usually super kind of toxic and just about winning. But I think discussions like this, like I wasn't really so much a debate as more of a discussion. And I think it's important to just get ideas out there and test your own ideas on both sides, because usually not until you really talk it out and get against somebody that might have different views, you really like test the merits of your arguments or whatever. But this here's kind of an interesting one. What do you guys feel about the 94 crime bill? That was the first one I kind of saw.
Do me to go, or Dan, you want to take it?
I can just I've been definitely critical of Joe Biden on this bill, but I think we need to hold a lot of people accountable for that bill, because they made the decision that instead of investing in these communities and trying to solve the problem through uplifting them, they decided to basically just use punishment and negative reinforcement as the way to do it. And then clearly we've seen that did not work. It was not a good idea. But it wasn't just Joe Biden who made that. There was a lot of people who signed off on that bill, and I think we should hold them all accountable. It was a really bad idea in many ways.
I think the one thing I just want to say about it is I think the crime bill, not so much the policies of the bill, but I think something like the crime bill really shows how so much pork gets put into these bills, and I really wish I hope that's something that they work on in the future, because the Violence Against Women's Act was included in the crime bill. So anybody that had voted against it, they can say, well, he voted against the Violence Against Women Act. So that's one of the ways, they throw all that stuff in there. They did a lot of that with the stimulus bill. They throw all that stuff in there and they kind of force you to vote for it. Otherwise, you're the guy who voted against this, even though there was 37 things included that were bad.
I think I did a video that got a lot of heat and it got a lot of views. It was about the 94 crime bill. And I felt guilty about it, because here's the reality of the 94 crime bill is this. Every single person, whether they were of the minority community or not, knew exactly what the bill was doing, right? And that's a hard distinction to make, because a lot of people will look at that and go, oh, Joe Biden's a racist. But the reality is there were black leaders all over the country calling for the bill. They knew for a fact that it was going to solidify the crack versus cocaine disparity, right? It was going to make the sentences harder. It was going to keep these people in prison longer. And they wanted them off the street. And so they all signed off on it. There was a lot of good things in that bill, right? Violence Against Women's Act, the COPS program. There was also a lot of bad, though. And I think the bad in that bill is what needs to be fixed. You got to remember, though, completely different era at the time. They were working on broken windows. They had the broken windows theory going. They had community policing was still in its heyday, and they had given up on, in large part, rehabilitation for prisoners. They had given up on it.
Right.
And,
we're way more educated about how punishment doesn't work and rehabilitation is the way to go than we were back then.
Yeah. So
you were very unpopular if you were against, punishing prisoners back then.
Right, and the Republicans wanted a harsher bill, and we've taken it in what, 26 years. We've taken a huge swing on the way that we want our criminal justice system to work. But we need to percent a lot. And just to clear this up, the First Step Act did not undo the 94 crime bill. I know that's been a thing, but it it helped a little, but
Yeah.
not even. It was baby steps.
Okay. What do you think is the first step our society needs to take to come back together after Biden takes office? Like policy, anything, I don't know, whatever.
Um,
Whatever floats your boat.
I would say that just on an individual level, we need to be uh, far more open to discussions, and I think we've in the last couple of years gotten really divisive with each other. I try to do my best to call out both sides on my channel, uh, and but also to be open to conversations with people and I follow many people that I disagree with a lot, and sometimes I like to challenge their views, but I think it's also there's just so much of demonizing the other side that if we do if we right the ship on that here, you're going to have these younger generations who eventually are going to be leading the country. They'll be growing up with a different mindset rather than this, because when I was a kid, it was that you don't talk about politics at all, and then now all of a sudden it's that just like you talk about it, you're open with it, and if someone disagrees with you, they're like a bad, evil person. And I feel like, however, I'm not exactly sure the right way to right that ship is, but I think being open to conversation and having discussions like this is one way of doing that.
I think just as far as a policy thing, I think one thing we need to do is regulate the shit out of these social media companies, because I do not like how these algorithms and everything they put people in these echo chambers. And I make content about the far right and just QAnon stuff like that, and it's crazy how easily people fall down those holes. And I think we need to put work on getting people out of their echo chambers, and yeah, just having conversations like this are very important. As far as policy, I think Joe Biden has to do something when it comes to healthcare. He has to pass another stimulus bill. He needs a big stimulus bill. He needs to show people that he can actually lead and get things done, because we don't want to hear I can't because I have a Republican Senate or this or that. Because the whole time that Trump was in office, the story was, oh, well, he's destroying us with executive orders. So don't tell me you can't undestroy us with executive orders. There's plenty of stuff. The American Prospect, which is a really good news source, they came up with 277 things that Biden can do by executive order, including $50,000 worth of student loan cancellation with the stroke of a pen for everybody. I mean, whether you agree with that or not, there is plenty you can do.
Yeah, I would like my student debt canceled.
Yeah, I didn't even begin paying off mine, so I feel you
would
there.
not complain. I think that right now it's sort of news has become like news has really become a grocery store, right? Everybody gets to pick their own brand, and I think it's horrible, right?
Yeah.
On the left and on the right.
You go to get your ideas validated, not informed.
Exactly. Everyone goes there to look to find out why they were right, as opposed to what the truth is. And I think that's a huge thing: is how do we regulate that so that these companies? Because I mean, I read right wing news sources quite a bit, right? And they admit a lot of shit. Left wing does. Left wing usually changes the narrative to fit their agenda, but right wing omits stuff. And it's something where we need to have regulation for these companies online. I mean, that's just.
Yeah. And there's things like the Both Sides app, which I've just gotten into recently, which I think is a really cool resource that brings up sources from both sides, well, as the title implies. That's, I think, a direction that I think we need to become more acceptable at, as being able to look at both sides of an issue, rather than just, again, putting yourself in an echo chamber and only listening to like CNN or Fox News or what have you.
Yeah, because they're terrible too. CNN and them, they push. I mean, they're not outwardly spreading propaganda like the Daily Wire or something, but they're they push narratives
And they're
all
trying
the
to make
same.
money too, so it's like
Yeah, they don't inform
problematic
you
in that way.
enough. They'll run the same 3 stories all day on a 24-hour news network.
Yeah, just somebody
Uh,
else covering it, and they always put breaking news. It's like, God damn it.
T Nathan in the chat. Yes, I was aware, guys. Me and friends with T Nathan. He's my homie.
What's up,
How
T.
are you going to divorce the creation of the social construct of race from the ism associated with racism? That's a question. No, I kind of read that stupid, but you guys see it.
You're going to divorce the creation of the social.
I don't know if that. Yeah, is it, I don't know if that's at somebody or just asking.
So how are we going to have the differences in race and end racism?
He might be too big brain for us. I don't know.
I'm assuming that's what he's asking.
Yeah.
Creation.
I mean, I think, well, just from my perspective, it's again trying to not focus on the idea of race and like social identity with your ethnic group rather than just yourself as an individual. I mean, it's obviously you can't ignore that wholly because it does have an effect, but I think encouraging people to not look at race as much is going to help mitigate those issues in the first place. But yeah, that's my take on that.
I think race, in more ways than people are willing to admit, is linked directly to the economy. If you go back into history, that's what it was about. It was about land. It was about resources. It was about cheap labor. And I think that there's been this, for what, 400 years now at this point, or longer, since 1600s. There's been this big push to always have infighting among different racial groups. It's an easy way for capitalism to split us up, right? Like versus working class or middle class, right? I think if we can achieve economic stability where people aren't fighting over resources, where they aren't worried about whether or not they're going to feed their kids, right? You're going to get to, I won't say we'll get rid of it, but we can get to a better field economically where people don't feel like people that are different than them are the enemy. And so I sort of take the economic approach that we need economic inequality and economic security for people to stop attacking based on race. In large part, I know you're going to have the crazies, but the white supremacists. But I think it's an economic issue for the most part.
Yeah, I think economic security is huge. I can say for myself, who is coming out and trying to work as an actor, and I've struggled financially to a very large level. It puts a lot of strain on a person, and having it like that strain leaks into your mental health, your physical health, and that makes it just doubles down on you not being able to catch up because you're dealing with all these other issues that are exacerbated by your financial status. It's something incredibly important, and I think going back to like that affirmative action, that's why I think partially it needs to be looked at as more of a class issue rather than just specifically a race issue, because I know I also have heard a lot of people recently, just like for the election, calling out all these, like rural, lower class, white people as just like these dumb hicks that voted for like Donald Trump, but it doesn't like. That's like another issue of classism because these are like poor people that have very different, livelihoods than someone living in a, in an urban area, and there's an issue with just delegating that their political status is just as an account of them being like uneducated rather than partially having to do with just the class that they are. So
So we had a battle in the comments. About 40 people were asking me to read T. Nathan's comment, and then about 40 other people were like, "Who the fuck is T. Nathan?" That's why I was laughing. I really don't have a lot of other questions here. Yeah.
Again, sorry to everybody for my sniffling. I know that's probably have been an
Oh yeah,
annoying.
your sniffling was the talk of the town. The
Very nice.
chat, I suppose.
It's I'm telling you, it's just as annoying to me. I promise you.
I'm sure. Yeah. You don't have COVID or nothing, do you? Hope not. Shit.
Actually, just got tested this past week because I was we had contact with somebody. I flew home briefly, and then right when I got home, one of my friends was like, "I just tested positive." And I was like,
Did you see Donald Trump Jr. has COVID?
I did see that earlier today, which is
Figures.
interesting. But the numbers are going way up all over the place, so I'm assuming we're probably going to see a whole lot more cases in prominent people because it's affecting everybody.
Yeah. No,
But,
it's Biden said no national lockdown, but I mean it's getting scary, man. I mean it's
we
I'm
have a
just glad.
curfew here in California now, 10 o'clock. It's
Yeah,
coming up
they're
here in
shutting it down in Minnesota too.
Yeah,
2 hours,
Washington just closed down again.
which just seems
So-
kind of silly to me. I mean, maybe I guess on weekends it makes sense, but in terms of weekdays, I mean, there's not many people out past 10 anyways. It just I don't know. I don't see how just specifically past 10 o'clock that's going to be that beneficial. But honestly, LA has been in a pretty heavy lockdown since March, basically, and we haven't
Yeah,
really
you
seen
guys have
that.
had the worst lockdowns out there.
It's
They
been
just
rough. It's been rough, I'll tell you.
we need stimulus, man. I am so like that is probably my biggest beef with the current uh government is that the only reason we got the first one is because the market crashed, and now that the market's doing fine, they refuse to do anything, and Nancy Pelosi's playing games. The Republicans were never going to come to the table anyway, but she wanted to hold back on it. It just, the whole thing's a shit show, and meanwhile people are losing jobs, businesses are going under, and
You going back to like the solution, I kind of forgot to mention. It's something that I like to promote a lot on my page in general is ending the two-party system. However, the best way for us to do that, I think, is absolutely beneficial because I think a lot of people are tired of having two choices that they're not excited about voting for. Um, it's been a problem since I've been alive, that and it just doesn't make sense for us to have this illusion of choice. So, and a lot of times these especially moderates, they they appeal to the people on the extremes of both ends, but at the end of the day, they just put the same like corporate benefiting policies that that don't benefit the everyday average citizen. So I think that's one of the biggest issues we have here, and even just having a third option that might not necessarily have, it just is going to force the Democrats and Republicans to kind of reevaluate their plan because they can to fit all of your ideals into one of two boxes just is silly. It's a silly idea.
yeah, no, it the only thing that, like, I mean, I'm no fan of the two-party system, but in order for a third party to be viable, it would just take so much. I mean, you got, they're the corporations, the PACs, the Congress, the House. I mean, say even, if Joe Jorgensen pulled the craziest upset in the world, she'd be on an island all by herself, and you can see what even these people that, have entire party backing with money and everything, financing years of, rapport, they can't get anything done. But I think the biggest thing we need to do is get money out of politics. And that's, that was what originally draw me towards, the being a progressive in the first place, was that they were, the most serious about getting money out of politics. And even if we have like very different ideas about the world, if you get the money out of it, it at least makes it our conversation, not Pfizer and fucking Goldman Sachs's conversation, because they're the ones that are financing these things. And, you know, whether it's the NRA or it's, you know, Wall Street who was funding Biden, or the NRA who's funding Trump. I mean, it's not us, you know, that's the big club and you ain't in it thing. And that's who's in charge of it right now. And with the 6-3 Supreme Court, I don't see Citizens United getting overturned anytime soon. But so we got to kind of do it ourselves in grassroots. And I think there's maybe 20 people in all of Congress and the Senate that don't take corporate PAC money. So it's more than there was 4 years ago. But
I would like to see a more direct democracy. I honestly couldn't tell you how the presidency would work out. I think we need to have a method for getting rid of him if he's shitty, whether it's a recall or whatever. I want to see a direct democracy amendment. I want the people to be able to vote for it. I also like the idea of the justices. I mean, that's a headache. How do you deal with that? I think a rotational court. But I think
a lifetime term seems excessive. Absolutely, in that
the court has been destroyed. It's just another branch of the government at this point anymore. It's, you know, it's Republican and Democrat. It basically at this point, you know, that was the last bastion. You know, they used to make a spectacle of, you know, appointing a moderate, you know, that would, you know, play to both sides. There's really no swing votes anymore for the most part. I mean, unless Amy Coney Barrett surprises all of us, which I don't think she will.
I think the Supreme Court's just destroyed. I think they need to put them on a rotation. I would like to see more than 3 parties. I don't know how you would elect the president if it would just be popular vote. I want to see factions though, like people.
We need ranked choice voting too.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of support, at least from my followers when mentioning things like this for like ranked choice voting. I don't know exactly what the negatives for that would necessarily be, but it seems like the positives are enough over what we currently have. Certainly.
Surprisingly, they had it on the ballot in Michigan. They voted it, or not Michigan, Massachusetts, but they voted it down. I mean, a lot of progressive ballot measures passed, but that was in Massachusetts. They voted it down. They have ranked choice voting in Oregon.
Maine has it too.
Yeah, Maine too.
I think another issue is that, you know, if you look at, you know, early presidents, the president today has far more power than the early presidents did, and far more than I think what was intended when, you know, the founding fathers were you know, writing up this political system that we have. The president just has there's far too much, you know, power for one specific person, and I think it's probably not ever going to go back, you know, honestly. But I think that's a big issue with our system.
Yeah, there's a name for it. It's like something executive theory. Bill Barr's a big proponent of it, but you know, that's kind of why Trump brought him on. But it's called something like, we're basically the president. You know, they interpret it, the Constitution, as the president just has like power overall. But yeah, no, we need a rework of so many things, because, you know, that one of the founders believed that nobody should be able to govern over more than, as far as the state level, no one should be able to govern over more than 50,000 people. You know, we've fucking blown way past that in a lot of places, but we have 4 senators in the Dakotas where there's about 16 people total. You know, so it's all.
There's just a large issue, I think, with you know, there's 2 different, you know, countries essentially, and a lot of people, you know, pointed it out where we see states where, you know, every single county with like smaller populations vote red, and then you've got the large cities that vote blue, and it's like these people live 2 different lives. They're voting for like 2 different presidents essentially, and what they feel like personal needs, and I feel like that's part of the problem with the amount of power that the president has. It should be more of a local and state level, where we have the powers, because we're supposed to be a union of 50 states. And I feel like we're trying to put more emphasis on the idea of the country as a whole, when there's such different cultures between states. There's different costs of living between each states, and like having less of an importance on the president and way more importance on your local and state governments, I feel like is another part of the issue here.
Right. All right, guys. I think that was pretty pretty good conversation. Anybody in the chat that enjoys my content tomorrow night, the few videos that I got taken down off YouTube, the QAnon debunk videos, I'm going to be streaming them tomorrow night on Twitch, probably around the same times we started this, 6 or 7. And hopefully Twitch will keep them up because YouTube, Q people keep mass reporting my videos and getting strikes on my channel. So, but luckily I got this one removed today. So hopefully it won't happen anymore. But yeah, so I'll be streaming that tomorrow night. If you guys could like the stream on your way out, I'd really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. Follow these guys on
thanks for hosting, man. Thank you.
You ready for it? Okay, bye.
Right. See you guys.
All right, see ya.
Oh,
Have a
see you,
good
bud.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, he actually left.
he did. He dipped right out of there. All right, and goodbye.
Yeah,
to
man,
Jack, guys. Thanks for coming in and listening with us, and enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, I plan on having a lot more of these, bro. So anytime you want to come on, just let me know and we'll set it up.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting it.
Yeah.
And goodbye to everyone in the chat.
All right. Peace. I think, yeah.